Hey, hi everyone. In this video, let's try to understand how we can submit a job to Databricks cluster using a programmatic way. So before going into that details, let me also explain what are various ways of submitting jobs to Databricks cluster in various cloud environments. So this is the post I think which I have written almost 1 year back, and if you see AWS, we have different ways of doing it. You can use Airflow. Within Airflow, you can use Databricks submit run operator to submit job to Databricks cluster, and that you can host on AWS EC2. This is one way of doing it. Other than that, you can write your own code with this operator. You will have vendor login, and you cannot customize a lot of things. So if that's the case, you can write your own code using Databricks Jobs REST API, and you can also use Lambda as a compute, but Lambda has a timeout of 15 minutes, or that's what I can recall when I was working with AWS. But now I'm not sure if the timeout has changed. With this, direct Lambda will not work. You might get timeout issues if the job is running for more than 15 minutes. So for that, you need to use step function as well to basically divide this lambda into multiple lambdas. So if you see here, you're using a lot of services. Because of that, the cost might be more, and people are not much interested in doing this way. So this is another way of doing it. Now the third way is you can write your customized Python code using this Databricks Jobs API, and you can host this code on AWS EC2, right? So as well as you can also write this code in call command. For that, you need to write a shell script, and that script you can host on AWS EC2. Okay, so there are a lot of ways of doing it, but what I see is primarily people are using Airflow as a compute, and they're not using this direct operator because, as I said, it has a vendor lock-in. Instead, they're writing their own code using Databricks API to submit the jobs. Okay. Now, if you're using Azure, you have this Databricks activity, notebook activity. So this is very famous. If you're using Azure, people are mostly using this only. This doesn't need any kind of introduction. So other than that, you can also host Airflow on Azure Virtual Machine, and you can use Airflow Databricks submit an operator to submit the jobs to their discussion. But I don't think people are doing this. I have never seen a single organization using Airflow on Azure Virtual Machine. Instead, they were directly using ADF or Databricks activity. Right? But if you're looking for any serverless solution, you can use Azure Functions as a compute, and take use of this Databricks Jobs API to submit the jobs. Similarly, you also have logic apps. You can also use logic apps as compute. Okay. I hope you guys got some idea like what is this about, and what I'll be doing in next few minutes. Right. Now, coming to the code, I have the code ready, but I'll not be copy pasting. So instead, let's try to understand line by line so that you guys will have a clear idea. Now, two things here. I said I'll be using Databricks REST API to submit the job, right? Now, if you're familiar with Python, in Python you have request module. Using request module, you can interact with any of the REST API endpoint. Right? So for that, what I will do, I will first import request model here. Okay, import request, and then I'll be passing JSON payload for this to this REST endpoint. For that, I'll also import JSON here. Import JSON. Now this is fine. You have imported all the libraries. Now, how do you submit job to database cluster? So that is where this endpoint comes into picture, right? Now, how do you post a request to any endpoint? For that, you will need to say request dot post, right? Now, what is the endpoint URL? Let me just copy paste this. So this is your Databricks account URL. This changed for every account, and this is again constant where I'm using of 2.0 version, and within that I'm taking use of run submit endpoint to submit job to Databricks cluster. Okay, so this is my endpoint. Now I also need to pass something called payload. So within payload, I need to say to which cluster I need to submit this job and to which notebook I need to trigger. So that info I am passing in the form of payload. So for that, I'll also take this payload here. Okay, so this is also copied. Now, what is this payload? Let me also copy this payload, job payload. So coming to the job payload, first one is run name. Here you can pass whatever you want. So ideally, it's better to have a table name as your run name, and then you have something called existing cluster ID. So in this example, we'll be submitting job to existing cluster ID, so which is nothing but interactive cluster ID. Maybe in further sessions, we can see how we can submit a job to job cluster. But for this example, before triggering job, we should have our cluster ready, and we should also have the cluster ID. So I have the cluster ID ready. For that, I just copy paste it here. And so this signifies what notebook you want to trigger, right? There's a notebook task. Here you can pass notebook path. So this is my notebook path here. And so in this example, if you see, I'm not passing any parameters. But let's say if you have any parameters, you can also create another dictionary here. You see here, this is a dictionary. So you can create another dictionary with base parameters, and you can provide your parameters here. Okay, cool. So with that, I think we are able to connect to this endpoint, and we also provided the JSON payload. Now this is fine, but how does it authenticate with my database cluster? If you see here, nowhere I provided any connection step or any authentication key to connect to my Databricks cluster. So for that, there is something called headers. Within headers, I'll be passing my Databricks token. Okay. So let me also copy paste this Databricks token. Just a second. Okay, so this is copy pasted. Now, in case if you wonder how do you get this token, for that you can go to your Databricks. Where is Databricks? How do I close this? Okay, let me just open again. This is my Databricks instance. You can just log into this Databricks instance, and after that, you just need to go to settings. Let me log in here. This is my workspace. Okay, so just click on here, and then you have something called user settings. Uh, in user settings, you can generate a new token. Just click on this and just provide any comment, and it can generate the token for you. So I already generated this, and I'm using the same token here. Okay. Now this is fine. What I'll do, I'll just submit this and see what will happen. Let me just run it. Okay, so this process is already exited. Right? Now, if you see here, this is actually running in a asynchronous form. Means it's just submitting the job to Databricks cluster, but it is not waiting for your job output. Now, let's say I trigger this notebook, but due to XYZ reason, this job has failed. How do I know that, right? So there's no way of getting it. Let's say the job is running for maybe 1 hour. How do I know that? Because here it is running in asynchronous mode. The moment it is trigger the code, it is coming out of the loop. Now this is not the right way of doing it. So for that, what we will do first, we will actually capture the run ID for this execution. Now, when I submit it, right? So for every submission, it will basically capture the run ID. So we'll use that run ID to check the status periodically. So for that, I'll assign this to one variable, the response. So this is my response. Okay. Now, if I use this, I can get the run ID for this submission. So what I'm doing here, by default, I'll be getting the syntax format. I'm converting that into key comma value base using this JSON nodes. After that, I'm accessing this key. The key is run ID, and which will basically give me this run ID. So let me also submit this. Okay, so it didn't give me any run ID here. Why is it so? Mm, okay, so anyways, let's go to the next step. I think there is some issue here. Now I have the run ID. This is fine. Now, periodically, I need to check the status of this run ID, right? So for that, you have another endpoint. So I'll be using this endpoint to periodically check the status for this run ID. Okay. So if you see the code here, here I'm using get method because I need to get the status of this request. I'm using request.get. Again, the URL is same, but the endpoint, if you see here, I'm using submit endpoint. But here I'm using get run endpoint. Here I also need to provide this run ID. So to which run ID you want to get the status. So for that I formatted this whole connection or REST API string, and then I just replace this run ID here. Okay. Now here I don't need to provide any kind of JSON because since this is a get method, right? It doesn't require any payload. And for headers, again I provided my authentication key. Okay. So this will give me the status of my run ID. So let's print the status for this get response and see what's the output. Okay, so this is my job response. I'll just print it. Hey, there was some issue with the cluster ID, and because of that, it was not able to submit that, and it is giving the run ID as null. So what I did, I just replaced the cluster ID. So you can just go to this cluster. So this is my cluster, and you can just copy paste this. If you scroll right, you will see this cluster ID. So this is my cluster ID to which I am submitting my job. So I just replace this cluster ID, and if you see, I got my run ID and as well as the status for this run ID. So this is the run ID 29774, and I'm checking the status for this run ID here. So here it gave a lot of things, and one thing you need to concentrate here is life cycle state. Okay, so if it is pending means this job is still running. Okay, and if this is completed, that means the job is success. Okay, so what I will do here, I'll put a while loop. Let me go to the code again. Okay, so okay, I think here, if you see here, we have taken this entire response. So from that, we are actually getting the status, which is status for your result state. Okay, let me put it here. So I've taken the state. So this is my state, and then I've also taken the result state. Now let me print the status here. Submit this. Okay. So this is my run ID, and so it didn't give me any status. Why is it so? Uh, okay. Anyways, I understand. So what happens is initially when it is submitting, the status will be null the moment it submits. So that is where what it has done. It has printed the status as null, and then it exited this loop. So what I'll do here, I'll put a loop here so that you will understand what is happening. So I am using a while loop here. Okay. So I'll put a while loop here. So what I'm doing here, go to this loop until and unless status is success. Say the status is success, then it will not go here and it will come out of the loop. But let's say you just submitted this and the status is null, means the job is still running, or maybe the status is running, means again the job is running. So in that case, it will go here, it will wait for 3 seconds, or maybe you can customize this. In this example, it is 3 seconds. After that, it will check the status again. So to do that, again, I'm using the same code. So whatever we have here, okay. So whatever, so second. So whatever I have here, again, I'm using the same code. So which will give me the status again. It will wait for 3 seconds. After 3 seconds, it will check the status for that submission again. Okay. So and then what I'm doing, I'm actually extracting this status here from this response. Similar thing, whatever I'm doing here, similar thing, I'm getting the status. Now, what I'm saying here, if the status is failed, let me copy this. Yeah. So if the status is failed, then raise an exception, and come out of the loop. Okay. So say you submitted a job, okay, and that has gone to your cluster, and the initial status is maybe null or running. So since it is running, it will come to this loop because the status is not equals to success. It will wait for 3 seconds and then it will check the status again. Okay. Now say after 3 seconds, maybe the job is finished, but the status is failed. If it is failed, then it will come out of the loop and then it will raise an exception. Okay. But let's say still the job status is running. Again, it will go to the loop. It will wait for 3 seconds. Okay. And then it will check the status again. Now, say after 30 minutes, maybe the job is succeeded. Now, after this, the status will be succeeded here. It will try to enter this loop again. Since it is succeeded, it will come out of the loop. Okay. So that's the whole idea of putting this while loop. It will make sure your process is only exited only when the job status is success or fail. Okay. So what I'll do, I'll just execute this and see what will happen. Okay. So this is my run ID. I got the run ID and job is in pending state. I think initially it is giving empty. So you can just track the status for this here. Okay, the job is succeeded now. If you go here, okay, it is saying that job in success state. Okay. Now let's do another thing. Maybe let's try to change the timeout and see what is happening in PyJump. I'll just change it to 10 seconds and 20 seconds. Okay. Let me run it again. I got the run ID and if I track the status of this job, so it is still running because there is a timeout here. So I put some sleep here. So it is still running, and it is saying that job is in empty state. Maybe there is something missing here, but the whole idea is it will come out of the loop only when the job is success. Okay, so it is still running, and here you can see. Okay, I think now this is finished, and this is also finished. Okay, I hope this is helpful, guys. In further sessions, let's try to understand a few more topics. Thank you so much. Bye.